Hey everybody, Quantum here, and in this video I'm going to be giving you my insights into the card market for Disney Lorcana now that we've had Shimmering Skies out for just over a week in its hobby store release, and we have the big box release coming up very shortly, 2 weeks after the August 8th release on the set in hobby stores. But just as context, I have spent over $1,000 on cards this month, mostly in Shimmering Skies. Again, if you've been following me, my posts, you know that I said instead of buying any sealed product, I was going to try in the singles market to see what maybe I could generate there instead of spending all that money on sealed product that just results in bulk. So I think I've been pretty diligent overall in my tracking of prices for certain cards and meta relevant cards, testing what's going to be good, seeing some tournament results. We just did a meta report the other day, for example. So, that's where I'm coming from. Let's go ahead and jump straight in. I'm going to do my best to try to stay very concise and succinct. So, to prevent rambling on. The first card we're going to take a look at is Daisy Duck, and hopefully everything loads properly, guys. I know sometimes the screen doesn't record when I'm going over like interactive graphs and stuff, but the market price on this thing seems to be fairly stable. It does look like it's coming down a little bit. You can see it kind of tapering off on the graph here. Again, this might not show up on the screen clearly, but hopefully it does. You can see that a lot of the bulk of this card got sold right on release, where then it started to spike up, but is now on a downward trend. And the main reason why is, I think, because of aggro. A lot of people pick this up for aggro decks, which are very easy to play. So a lot of casual players may be looking at grabbing a card like this in order to just play a very easy deck out locals. The unfortunate thing is this card is still very meta relevant. It is going to be played in pretty much every Amber deck, including Amber Steel Song, which a lot of people are pegging as one of the better decks in the format now. So this card, I think, still has some staying power. Personally, I would not be picking them up at $20 for non-foil copies. As a super rare, there will be a lot to go around, especially once it hits big box stores. But from my experience, and again, correct me if I'm wrong, the prices don't really adjust that much as you think they would after big box release. It seems like prices usually settle within the first 2 weeks from the hobby store release, and then the big box just increases stock, but it doesn't really do much to adjust prices. The thing that really fluctuates prices is meta relevancy. So does a card do really well in a tournament or not? So for example, the Queen, Diviner from set 4, I believe, right? When that card ended up winning the DLC in Bologna, the card literally doubled in value, and the foil ones went up a ton too, right? What I will say is I did pick up foil copies. Unfortunately, I finally bit the bullet after I saw the trending price of foils, as you can see here on TCG Player, going for around 25 USD. I picked up 3 foils, not even a playset, at $30 each Canadian. So it seemed to be going for like 35 to 40 Canadian here, and I was like, well, from what I know, right, you get 1 foil super per box, and therefore finding foil ones of this compared to non-foils would be a lot harder. So while I think the non-foils probably decline as more product is released, the foil ones might be harder and harder to find as people look to foil out their decks. So I think it was a relatively safe investment. Time will tell. I don't think it's worth 30 foil. I think it probably should be worth 20 in foil, but nothing I can do when people are going crazy over this card. Once aggro really falls off and people realize that it's not as good as I think people think it will be, like I don't think it has enough staying power to beat top players playing best, like good decks in DLC or big tournaments, I think the price of the non-foils really fall off. But I would maybe look at getting your playset after big box, and hopefully the price adjusts downward if you don't care about the foil ones. And I know we spent a little bit of extra time there on Daisy, but it was literally the most hyped up card in the set, so it's warranted. Next up we have Mufasa. Again, in trying to keep concise on this one, I just don't see the value of this card holding. I think this goes kind of the way of Elsa from the first chapter, where it's a very beautiful card. It's maybe like the legendary of the set, air quotes, in terms of like the face of the set. But in terms of meta relevancy, and Elsa was meta relevant when she came out, this card I don't even think is really all that meta relevant right now. It is a very strong card, don't get me wrong, but the way I look at a Sapphire card like Mufasa here is how relevant is it in comparison to other things I could be playing to deal with my opponent's board. And this thing doesn't do anything to deal with your opponent's board. It's a very powerful card to come down and develop your game state, but we know Sapphire decks like Sapphire Ruby want to do things to deal with your opponent's board, right? They ramp into high ink in order to start playing high cost removal Ruby cards. Steel just tries to race you with a dime usually, right? But does this card help facilitate that? I think Tamatoa is still stronger. It's inkable as well, whereas this is not. So it's in a weird place. I personally did not buy any copies of this. I think it is way overvalued at its current price, especially for the non-foil. I bought no foil copies. No non-foil copies. I did eventually get FOMO and bought a foil copy of this because I got a pretty good deal on it. Like it was 44 Canadian, I think is what I paid for my foil copy. and it's going for basically 44 USD, which I believe is something like 50, 53, 55 Canadian, something like that. So if I saved, 10 or so dollars on a foil one, which again, going back to what I was saying, I have a friend who opens up multiple cases, and he was telling me he sometimes was only getting 2 foil legendaries in a case. The foil legendaries would seem a lot rare to get, right? So I was like, yeah, I'll pick up one foil one. I'll see where it goes. If I lose 10 bucks on it in the end, it's not a big deal. Because the foil Elsas ended up holding some value, not the $100 that they were initially, but they're still worth like 50 bucks, right? So if this card settles around there, I'm fine. This is one of the best enchanted, if not the best enchanted in the set, though. So if you have that enchanted, I think that does go up over time. Again, hard to say though, because it's hard to say if this is going to be meta relevant. Maybe in a Sapphire deck that focuses on Mufasa, it could be played in a meta relevant deck. But other than that, I just don't see a way that this fits into the current iterations of Ruby Sapphire or Sapphire Steel. The final thing I'll say about this card too is this is also not a card I think you play 4 of, which vastly impacts the price because people aren't buying out playsets, right? So if you only need like 1 or 2 copies of this, let's say 2, there's literally double the amount of the product available for purchase because everybody's buying 2, no one's buying 4. It's not like Daisy where everyone's buying 4 of it, right? So keep that in mind as well. Again, could be wrong on this take, but that's how I see it and why I opted to avoid the Mufasa. Next up, we've got Merlin, Intellectual Visionary. So this is a card I bought 3 foil copies of because, again, just to me, I equate, since I'm not buying sealed product, I equate my buying of the foil legendaries to, well, if I would only get 1 in a box, which is what I got in the last set, and that doesn't even seem to be the case in this set, I'm like, if I pay $21 for a foil here, that's 3 packs. And if I buy 3 foil ones, that's 9 packs. I'm not getting 3 legendaries in 9 packs, right? So to me, a card like this is valued if I was able to pick up 3 foil ones at $21, which is what I ended up picking up. I picked up 3 foil ones. I did pay more though. I paid 24, I think, for my foil ones here. But this is a card that I think continues to drop over time because the only real meta contending deck that this could potentially be played in, which hasn't even been proven yet because it was never really an ink pairing in the meta before, was Sapphire Amethyst. I don't think this card has a large following behind it. Like a lot of the people playing this game probably don't even know the whole like Merlin, Mim, King Arthur whole storyline with Disney. So I think this card doesn't have that staying power like Mufasa has in terms of driving up its value, or Elsa or something like that. So for that reason, I do see this card continuing to decline in price, especially for the non-foil. The foil ones I think can hold between 20 to 25 USD or between 22 to 30 Canadian. But again, that could even be wrong. This card might go to like $7 for the non-foil and $15 for the foil, right? It's hard to say. What I will also say before I move on from this is I don't think we see another card like this released in Lorcana for a long time. We may get other tutor cards, but for very specific things. To just search anything, I don't think you get a card like this for a long time again. And what I will say too is as we get better and better search targets for this does become better. The issue continues to be, like I said, is how many iterations of Sapphire decks will this be playable in? Because you have to shift it to get the ability. The current Sapphire Merlins we have are virtually unplayable. You need to play this in Amethyst, which to be fair has literally some of the strongest cards in the game, which are Merlin cards. So it does seem to be fitting well in there, but how well does it just fit into the overall strategy, right? So that is something to consider. It's in a weird space, but I do think this card goes down over time. So if you are looking to pick these up for the non-foil ones, I think they do go lower. The foil ones are hit and miss. The Bare Necessities is a card that I've talked about in the past where under $1 I said, if you don't have these, pick them up. And boy, oh boy. Well, I mean, because, doubling a price of $1 is $2, so it's not really that much of a loss. But yeah, it's definitely been on the up, right? So called this one saying that, it's a great card. It has a lot of meta relevancy. It's played in a couple of different decks. Amber Emerald Discard, which I think is a pretty strong deck. Obviously, Amber Steel Song will play it, which a lot of people are high up on in this set, given the release of Daisy and Navine. But yeah, this is a great card. I have 4 foils and 4 non-foils, and I paid virtually almost nothing for all of them, right? The foil ones, I think I paid $3, and then I picked up my 4th one for $5. So I paid a little bit more for the final foil one there. But the non-foils I picked up for like 50 cents each for ones I didn't pull, right? So the non-foils are now solid over $1. They probably continue to trend up because a card like this is very, very strong and will continue to be strong, I think, in the future. So keep an eye on it if you're looking at them. Hopefully you have them already because I definitely would not want to be paying $3 USD for a non-foil copy. Another card that I called a long time ago, again, if you've been watching my channel for a while or my market watches, you know we've been talking about Ariel for a long time, where I said, yep, now was the time to pick them up when they were, I think it was around here, right? Just prior to the release of Shimmering Skies. Like, this card is always going to be good, and it doesn't look like it's getting power crept anytime soon. And even if it does get power crept, it still has relevancy because it replaces itself potentially, right? Scry 4, put a song into your hand. That's an extremely powerful ability. It's an inkable 3-cost card. It is Singer 5. All of that is going to be relevant. Yes, we've gotten more singers in the game, but none of them can scry for replacing themselves, right? A 2/3 body is decent for 3, for sure. Not that you care about the questing lore here, but what's also nice is this is the name Ariel. This is a major character in a Disney franchise. This card will get continued support, Floodborn support, etc. It's a hero and a princess. A lot of different synergies going for this. Continues to be a great card and a first chapter card, which means it's just harder and harder to find. What's really unfortunate, again, if you watch my Market Watch videos, or I forget where I mentioned it, probably in a previous Market Watch, I said I finally picked up my foil copies at $15 Canadian. And I said even then I overpaid by a little bit. I could have got them for 12, but I'm like, I know this card's going to go up. The foil ones are now $30 Canadian. So less than 4 weeks ago, I picked them up for half the price. However, I bought 3. Only one of them came in the mail. The other 2, I guess, are lost, unfortunately, because I bought them off somebody. And it's been 3 weeks. They haven't shown up. They say it wasn't returned to them. And I'm not saying that they ripped me off or anything, but like, this stuff happens. So unfortunately, I only have 2 foils, and I definitely am not looking forward, if I even do, pick up my last 2 foils for the playset at $30 each now. Like I said, I picked them up for 15 3 weeks ago or 4 weeks ago. It's just really unfortunate. But yeah, this is, like, I saw this coming, and it ended up happening. But the non-foil is going up to like over $6, I think now. Well, $4 USD here. But I think it does keep trending up. I think $6 USD, $8 to $10 Canadian is where this card might land. And I do think that Steel Song is going to do very well at DLCs, because some of the best players in the world in this game are very good Steel Song players, and they will pilot a very strong Steel Song deck in the meta to victories in big tournaments. Whether or not it wins a DLC again, that's yet to be seen, but it will definitely win some tournaments for sure, some bigger tournaments. And people who don't have Ariel they're going to be looking to pick them up. So again, a card that becomes harder and harder to find. Very good, very meta relevant. Will always be good. You can never go wrong with picking them up. I think if you pick them up for under $8 Canadian, it's probably fair, because I really don't see this card dropping below that unless it gets a reprint or something. So very relevant. Grab Your Swords here, a starter deck card from the first chapter. Now becomes harder and harder to find, but it's in a weird spot. You can see here over the course of the year, because I think we just recently hit the 1-year anniversary of Lorcana. It's kind of been on the lower end. It is trending up a little bit, but again, I don't know if this graph is loading on the screen here, but essentially this card is in a weird spot where it continues to be a decent card, but it's really the only non-targeting, hit everything on the board action that we have for Steel that's really relevant. Nothing else is really that relevant. Like, I know we have Avalanche, the new Tug of War card, but they're not really that great. But this card just doesn't seem to do enough now. I think what we need and what we will see is the invention, or the power creep of this card, which I think is well overdue at this point for Steel, just because the dealing X damage is always very conditional for Steel, right? Like Daisy Duck. This card does nothing to Daisy, right? Like, it puts 2 damage on it, and then Daisy just continues to quest, right? You have to put this with something into the Daisy, and this costs 5, Daisy costs 1, right? So you can just see the value discrepancy there. What I do think we get, which, if they design a card like this, maybe they can give me credit. No, I'm kidding. Give me a royalty. But we called it here first. I think a card like Tug of War comes out or continues to be developed for Steel, where it becomes just a little bit more meta relevant. So we might get a new song that costs like 4, can be sung, and says something like, for deal 4 damage to characters costing 2 or less. Maybe that's too powerful, right? Because that would just decimate aggro. So maybe that card costs like 5 and is also uninkable. But whereas this card can deal 2 damage to everything. Or maybe you see a card come out that's a 4-cost inkable that says deal 4 damage to every card that costs 1 or less. Right? Maybe that's fair. 2 or less is probably too strong, because that's basically Big Sisu. But you probably see like very conditional Steel cards like that at some point. They have to make them inkable though in order for them to be relevant. If they make them uninkable, like, they just won't be played. Because you have a card like Avalanche, which is a 4-cost inkable action, so not even a song. 4-cost uninkable, deal 1 damage to every character, and banish a location if you want, which is a pretty strong card, but like it doesn't see play because it's just way too situational being uninkable. Even the I Flatten Them song, which banishes all items, which is very strong, is inkable, but it's still very situational, right? Dealing damage is pretty universal, but they need to make it inkable. So a card like this, you can tell, right? In Sapphire Steel and Amber Steel, it's like, do I play 3? Do I play 2? Do I play 0? Do I play 4? How many copies do I play based on the meta? And how good is it, even if aggro is in the meta, because of things like Daisy being able to survive it? So this card is in a very odd spot. I do think we are very well overdue for this card getting power crept and not being played anymore. It's still a good card, but like, again, there's so many awkward interactions that make it seem like it's not a great card in a lot of scenarios. Next up, we got A Whole New World, again with Amber Steel's song becoming a force in the meta, or like that's what we think, in set 5. This card, I think, will continue to trend up, especially if people don't have it and they want to pick it up if they see Steel Song doing well and they want to play it. This continues to be one of the most powerful cards in the game. It's a first chapter card. It doesn't look like it's getting banned, errated, or limited anytime soon. Could be wrong. I've been calling for that for a long time, but if they do end up doing that to this card, it does kill a lot of the deck and it does greatly warp the meta. So I don't think they'll do it. I think we might see chapter 1 rotate out, or part of chapter 1 reprinted and this card not included in the reprint. I do have 4 foil copies. I did end up picking up my playset prior to the release of this set because, again, I saw Steel Song being a top deck in the meta. I paid $25 for my foils. They're going for more or less 25 USD. So, you know, save myself $8 to $10 there on my copies. But this is a card where if I feel like it's a safe investment because it's going to be an iconic card for the rest of this game's lifespan, even beyond, right? It's a Disney card, so it'll continue to hold value even if this game dies probably. But it'll always be remembered as one of the game-breaking cards in the game from the first chapter. So if this game goes the way of MPG, I think, you know, this card in foil could be worth $100 a copy one day or more, right? So don't feel too bad about spending $100 on a foil playset overall. Again, if you have non-foil ones, hopefully you can get them for around $12 Canadian. I think $15 Canadian is pushing it quite high. I think this card probably should stabilize around 12, but it's clearly selling for more than that. It's going for 12 USD right now, right, which is like $15 Canadian. So yeah, I think it's partly on the up because of the Steel Song anticipation. But you know, if Steel Song continues to do well, which I think it will, this card likely continues to go up. Because like I said, there's no fear right now. I don't think of this card being axed or taken out of rotation in play. The Prince Navine is another huge legendary card from this set. A lot of people were saying, myself included, that this is probably the strongest legendary in the set. And I think that's still warranted even more than Clarabelle and stuff, simply because this card has such an insane impact in Steel Song, but it also has application in other decks. I did pick up 2 non-foils at $20 each, so I definitely got them at a very, very good price, and I picked up my foil one at $50. So I only have 3. I don't think I need 4. I don't think this card really will ever be played at 4 unless there's a very specific deck that's built around Navine, which I don't think is the case, but I think in Steel Song, because you already play so many uninkables, you have to be very careful with a card like this, especially since, you know, control decks like discard decks ripping songs out of your hand with Bare Necessities and Ursula Deceiver is still around, and that can really hurt Steel Song and this card as well, because if you have no song to play with this card loses a lot of value, and you need to play a good costing song. You need to play like a 4 or 5 cost song, I think, really to get the value out of this. When we take a look at the data here, after its initial release, it dropped down to like 20 USD. So yeah, getting it at 20 Canadian was an absolute steal in my opinion. And I do think this price is basically warranted right now. I think if you know, even with big box coming up, this price may end up creeping up as people see that this card is played in winning decks for Steel Song and other Amber decks even. Again, probably not too many other Amber decks, but I have seen iterations of Amber Emerald, and not that it's a thing yet, but Amber Ruby songs play this card. It can be very strong in that, but more than just its ability to come in and play a song for free, the fact that it's only costing 4 is not inkable, which hurts it, but it's still a 3/3 body that quests for 2. Like, there's been times where I've been playing against this card and it's dropped on me. They sing the song for free, and like I have a couple of things I need to do on my turn now, and I'm like, well, the biggest threat is this 2 questing Navine. Like, it's also a singer 6, so it can sing another like very powerful song. So I have to out it, and it already got its value on entering play. So that's what makes this card very good, is that you get value right away, especially if you can sing A Whole New World with it for free right away. That's, you know, 5 costs that you've sung for free out of nowhere. You still have all your other singers available for whatever you draw into. to deal with your opponent's board. Like, this card just facilitates so many potential, like, it's very versatile, potential interactions of play, which is why it's so good, which is why it warrants its price. It will be meta relevant, and it will continue to be meta relevant for the rest of this format. It is very good. Like, there's nothing else to say about it. So yeah, even after big box release, I don't see this card really going down too much. Like, you might be able, like, it might fluctuate a little bit. You might be able to get it at like $30 Canadian, which is like, nah, I don't really know. I can't really see this card going down to like 25 USD again, right? Like, look at where it's trending. Yeah, and then foil ones, again, I think are probably where the real value sits, because like I was saying, if you get like 2 foils in a case of 4 boxes, 2 out of every, like 1 foil every 2 boxes, a card like this just becomes more and more in demand, right? Because it's so hard to find in foil. So next up, we've got Chicha. This is a card, for some reason there's no foil listings on TCG Player. I picked up 3 non-foils at $2 each, which is probably too much. I probably overpaid by $1. I think this card probably should be, well, maybe $2 is fine. I mean, it's selling for like 2 to 3 USD right now. I think it could probably stay there because I don't think that this card is bad. I think it is a good card. It's not like it's going to go to like 50 cents or $1, I don't think. The foil ones, I think, are pretty expensive. Like, I picked up one foil one for $3.99, and I think they're like $8 right now in Canadian prices. Like, I can't find any. They're all like sold out for some reason. But keep in mind that this is a promo. So if you really want the nice looking foil, you can just get the promo one anyways, right? So yeah, there is that. But interesting card. If you are playing Sapphire, I think you can opt to play the Chicha engine with the Fishbones and any other ramp cards like the new Tipo, Mickey Mouse, Donald Duck, How Far I'll Go, One Jump Ahead, etc. There's a number of different support cards you can play with this in order to proc the draw. So I think it's good. I think Sapphire decks, some of them will play it, but I think the most competitive versions of Sapphire will not play this card. So keep that in mind. Next up, we've got Mim Elephant. I did pick up 4 foils and 4 non-foils of this card, so I picked up 8 copies in total. The foil ones I paid $11 Canadian for, and the non-foils I paid $4 Canadian for. So I paid 44 and 16, so I paid $60 for 8 of them, 4 foil and 4 non-foil. Overall, right now, it seems like it was a good value because this price is basically $11 to $12 in Canadian pricing, which is again what I paid. And then the non-foils do seem to be trending up. They did dip down and now they're back on the up. This card has yet to be proven in meta decks, like its meta relevancy. I do think it's a very strong card. The issue is, can I make the justification to fit this into my Amethyst decks over other cards? And I don't know if we're there yet, because when I've been playtesting with it, like, there are very, very small scenarios where I do want to play this. The 8 Mims that you already play in Snakes and Foxes, and even Snake is being cut back a little bit in certain decks, I think is enough bounce. Like, one of the primary reasons why this card was interesting to see be released now is because it's another Mim that introduces more potential for bounce, right? Like, bounce back characters that I can replay and get value off of on entering the field is very, very strong. It's a 3/7 body, so it's huge, and it actually has a pretty decent ability. It's easy for this card to stick, being such high willpower. And it does cost 4, and it is inkable. So it just has a lot of good things going for it. Given the history of Mim cards, I didn't mind paying the price that I did for it because I think it does hold value. And even if it drops, I don't think it drops too much further than the price that I paid or the price that it's currently at. So keep that in mind. Again, with anything regarding super rare similar to Daisy Duck, I think you just got to be a little careful of picking up the non-foils and overpaying for them, because non-foil super rares are going to be very abundant, especially after big box release. They'll be everywhere, right? Whereas foil super rares, I think, are a little bit more rare. I think I mentioned it already, but like on average, I think there's 1 foil super rare in a box. So keep that in mind. Again, good card. It's just, do I find the place to fit this into like my Ruby Amethyst, my Sapphire Amethyst, I guess. Yeah, if Merlin is being played, right? In my Steel Amethyst, like Amethyst fits with everything, right? Amethyst Emerald too. So it's like, does this card fit into there? Even Amber Amethyst aggro, can this card fit in order to come down and bounce back a Lilo that's exerted herself, bounce it back to hand and just replay it, right? Or are the existing Mim cards enough? So a lot to consider here. A good card, don't get me wrong, but may not be the most meta relevant, at least right now. But Yeah, I mean, I'd feel again. I did buy them, so I feel safe picking up the Mim elephants at $4. If I could get them again, and I haven't bought them yet, I'd pick them up at $4. Next up, we got Maximus Team Champion. I don't want to cover this card too much, but the one thing I do want to point out is there is potential for this card to be very good and be played in a lot of decks that play Ruby. Because unlike Flynn Rider, this card has the ability to gain you the lore at the end of your turn instead of the start of your next turn, like Flynn Rider does. So, Flynn Rider on 2 is obviously more mana friendly, but it gives your opponent the opportunity to match your Flynn or out your Flynn. Whereas if this card just comes down, especially in Amber Ruby decks where you're able to proc Strength Boost with the Queen, like Strength Boost Maui by 4, it becomes a 10 Strength character, or you play the Gaston inherently, the new Rush Gaston that costs 9, has 10 Strength. You play this Maximus and you just win the game potentially because it gets you 2 or 5 lore right away. So this card is potentially pretty strong. I picked up 2 non-foils at 99 cents each. For a super rare 99 cents, you can't go wrong. If you can pick them up for that price, I think it's worth grabbing a playset. I picked up 1 foil one so far for $3 Canadian. It seems to be going for that price more or less in USD, $250 USD here. I don't know if I'll pick up more foil ones, but this card is very interesting. I think it might be one of those cards that's overlooked, similar to Flynn. Like, I remember when Flynn came out, I picked up, and I have a YouTube post to prove that, like on my YouTube channel, like I picked up 6 of them for like $2 each, and then they ended up going to $10, right, for the non-foils, and then the foil ones ended up going to like 22. I'm not saying this card is going to go that route. It definitely will not, because Flynn is a lot more applicable, being able to be played on curve. But this card is very interesting in certain niche applications. This card is potentially very good for the simple fact that it gets you the lore instantly. The end of the turn thing is huge compared to the start of your next turn, right? So that's kind of what I'm taking away from this. And the ability to proc 5 lore is just like out of nowhere, just gain 5 lore. That's huge, right? Think about Lucky Diamond and the impact that has, that it did have with things like Belle from the first chapter, with the new Ariel, with Treasure Collector, with Tamatoa. So this card, very interesting. Something to keep an eye on for sure. The dock, not sure why I'm covering this, because I think right now the only deck that has really made a splash with this card is the Amethyst Steel Super Aggro deck that Vaughn ended up winning his, I think, locals with or something, going 4-0. It's an interesting card. So basically in Amethyst Steel, what you can do is dump out your whole hand as an aggro threat, right? And then bounce this card back to hand, replay it, draw 2. So once you have no hand, you're just constantly drawing 2 with this card, which is kind of interesting. Of course, you have to have Mims. You have to top deck Mims. So you have to kind of set it up, which is a little awkward, but the card advantage this thing can generate you is pretty interesting, especially in a deck that's very low to the ground. And you can just play out your hand very easily, because you play a lot of 1-drops. I don't think this card has too much movement. It's 99 cents for a non-foil, probably, maybe $2 for a foil. But if the steel aggro strategy is appealing to you, this is a card that you might want to pick up. But again, I don't think it really spikes up from this price anyways. Like, I'd never picked up copies of this, but I'll probably look at picking up a couple foil ones if I can get them for $2. Next up, we've got the big one in Clarabelle. So this is the one that I called in my Emerald video, and I have no idea how this card ever sat at $10. Like, it's crazy to me. But $30 now for non-foils. I picked up 4 foils at $25 each, which is basically the lowest price I ever saw it. So I definitely hit the mark on this one, I'm pretty sure. Because I think foil ones, do we even have any sales of foils? Going for $46 in USD. So that's like $60 Canadian, I think. Actually, I'm terrible at math. It's 1.36 conversion. So let's say 46 times 1.36. Yeah, it's $62 Canadian. That's crazy, man. 62 times 4 is $250 for a play set. I paid $100, so I saved myself $150. That's insane. And this is a card. If you don't know why it's good, try to briefly explain it here. So it's a 7-cost inkable right away, just fantastic. Inkability, great. It's a shift 5, so you get a 2-cost spread on the shift for the stats of a 5/6. That's very good. It survives Medusa, or doesn't even get affected by Medusa. It survives the Zeus. It trades with a Maui. All great stuff all around so far. A quest for 2, even better. What really pushes this over the edge as a card that I see going potentially the way of Beast, Tragic Hero, and Diablo is the ability Keep in Step. At the end of your turn, not just the turn you play it, but at the end of every turn that this card survives, if your opponent has more cards in hand than you draw cards until you have the same number. So when you first play this card, if your hand is empty and your opponent has 2 or 3 cards in hand, you draw 2 or 3. And then, if this card survives, your opponent ends up with 1 or 2 cards in hand at the end of their turn. They pass back to you, you draw your 1 card for turn, you play it or ink it or whatever, you have nothing in your hand, your opponent still has 1 or 2 cards, you draw 1 or 2 again. This card is a draw engine. Look at what happened to Beast Tragic Hero as a draw engine. This is a one-sided draw engine. It's not like Donald Duck. This draws you cards, not your opponent. Yes, it's conditional on your opponent having cards, but if your opponent's going to empty their hand so you don't draw off Clarabelle, I'm fine with that. If your opponent is a control deck that draws a ton of cards and you're going to draw like a ton all the time, I'm fine with that too. The applicability of this card in the meta right now is in the new Emerald Sapphire pairing, which has never really been a meta relevant threat before. But being able to ramp from your hand and refill your hand with Clarabelle is very good. This card has yet to be proven in other ink pairings, but the card's potential is absolutely off the charts insane in my opinion. I had the chance to buy an Enchanted for like 170 and I opted not to. I don't know if I'll regret that, but the Enchanted of this one doesn't look too nice in my opinion. I think I'm happy with just the foils. But yeah, this is super strong. It's getting bought out all over the place. So, take that into consideration. I don't see this card coming back down. It's just too strong. It's hard for me to justify telling you to buy it at this price too, because again, I have the screenshot showing where it was going for $9 and now it's like, I mean, this price here is quadrupled. Here in USD, it's tripled, right? Like, I think this is just the price you play for Clarabelle now. What I will say is if you can pick up, like, there are some Canadian shops that were listing the foil ones still to this day at $40 Canadian. I would probably aim to pick those up if I could, because I think the foil ones retain way more value. Like, I mean, if the spread between a foil and a non-foil is like $6 to $10, I just pick up the foil one because I know it'll retain value, right? But again, I don't think big box affects the price of this. I think everybody's looking to pick this card up because if you're playing Emerald, I think there's always a consideration to say you can play Clarabelle. And also, what is relevant too, which makes this card much more playable, is the fact that both of her shift targets on 1 and 3, the 1 cost 1 banishes an item if you pay an extra 2. That's relevant. That's good. And then the 3 cost 1 lets you draw a card if your opponent has more cards in hand than you, which is also a decent effect. So like she has good shift targets. So all around, she's just like amazing. I would not be surprised if she ends up surpassing, well, she already has based on this price, Navine. Again, the consideration is Navine already fits into a meta relevant deck in Steel Song, whereas this card is still yet to be proven as a meta relevant threat, even though it's very powerful. It's a more powerful effect than Navine, I think. But Navine already fits into an existing meta deck, whereas this card is yet to be proven, and that's where the spread is. So keep that in mind. This is a card that's very good, and it will continue to be good, at least for the rest of this set. Piglet, Poo Pirate Captain. This is a card that has been trending upward, again, similar to Daisy Duck. The aggro aspects of this card and facilitating lines of play in both Amber Steel Song and obviously any Amber Hyper Aggro deck is the reason why you're seeing the spike. I don't think it's worth a lot overall. Like I remember that this card was at $2 Canadian and like $4 for the foil one for the longest time. I picked up 3 foils at $4 each, and I was going to pick up my 4th foil one for $5, and I opted not to, and I probably regret that now. But yeah, I think like if you can pick this up, if you're looking to play aggro and you pick this up for around $3 Canadian, $3 USD is like $4 Canadian. It's kind of unfortunate, but like it is kind of expensive. The thing with this Piglet, in my opinion, my meta assessment of this card is that when it's good, it's very good. It's questing for 3. It's protected somehow, so it's going to continue to quest, or your opponent has to do very awkward plays in order to out this, and you're just in a really good spot. When it's bad, it seems terrible. It's a 2-cost 2/2 that quests for 1 when it's bad, which is terrible. So when it's good, it's very good, and when it's bad, it's very bad. So there's really no middle ground with this card, and so that's kind of the takeaway. I mean, I guess I shouldn't say when it's bad, it's very bad, because it is inkable. So at the worst, it is ink. It's still a character you can throw on board, and you can proc the +2 lore, right? Like as soon as you have 2 characters. So I just hate cards that have a 2/2 stat line for 2. It just feels like such bad value. But the fact that this thing can quest for 3 is relevant, because when you think about a card like we have a lot of 2-cost inkable 2/2 cards that quest for 2 vanillas, and this Piglet for the extra 1 lore is trying to set up an extra lore game with the condition that you have 2 other characters in play. So it's like, the extra lore, is it really worth the risk of playing this card where it only has one lore, right? If you don't have the other two characters on board, or would I rather just play a 2-cost 2/2 vanilla that quests for 2, right? So it's like a really awkward spot. Hopefully you understand what I mean there. But like I said, when it's good, it's very good. Next up, Mim Fox. So I just wanted to bring this up again, just because, as I mentioned many times before, this card continues to be very meta relevant. Yes, from the pre-release prices to where it is now, it's pretty much held its value since its initial drop after pre-release, which again, you should never be buying pre-releases. But this card potentially continues to spike up in price because we potentially have another. Is this the final? It might be the final one, but any Amethyst deck plays Mim Fox, right? Sorry for the cough there, guys, but Amber Amethyst aggro will play it. Ruby Amethyst plays it. Amethyst Steel plays it. Yeah, Emerald Amethyst plays it. I'm just trying to think of the deck list as I'm calling these out. So that's 4 ink pairings. The only ink pairing that never played Amethyst was Sapphire. And now with the Merlin and with the new cards we got in Amethyst, Sapphire Amethyst is a thing. Will it be super top tier? Probably not. It's probably going to be a 1.5 tier deck or something. But like now Mim Fox is played in literally every single ink combination of Amethyst. So the demand for this card, and being a 4 of, just continues to skyrocket, which means the price is going to continue to go up. So I just wanted to point that out for you guys because, again, I've been saying this from the beginning. This card will continue to be worth money until it's directly power crept, which I think will never happen because the card in and of itself is too strong for when it was released. Even to this day, it's still too strong. I think, well, to be fair, I think we've adapted to this card now, but like it still remains an insanely strong card. So yeah, it just gets more in demand, I think, with people wanting to play Sapphire Amethyst if they haven't already. But again, most people already have their playsets. Blue is an interesting one. This is on the upward trend again, a card that's used in aggro. Amber Steel Song can also play this. Chris Coy, who came second, also played this in his Amber Steel Song deck. But coming down, representing a protection for your aggro threats already on board, having your opponent be forced to run over this first, gaining you 2 lore in the process, is pretty nice. I picked up a foil playset at $2 each. The foils have since more or less doubled in price in terms of Canadian dollars. It's a good card, so I didn't mind picking up the foil ones at $2. I thought it was undervalued. The non-foils continue to be like under $1, I'm pretty sure. So yeah, you can like pick them up for hopefully a couple of cents on the dollar mostly. And if you don't have them, I would definitely grab them because under $1, why not? If you ever plan to play some kind of aggro strategy, I think this card will always be applicable. Again, being able to come down and just force your opponent to interact with this other than your exerted weaker aggro threats and then gains you 2 lore in the process, it's a good card, right? So in aggro strategies, I think Blue will continue to hold value. If aggro is not being played or people don't care about it anymore, this card is worth nothing because I don't really see it being played. I shouldn't say nothing. I don't really see it being consistently played in other decks right now, unless there's some other, I don't want to say broken line of play, but really strong line of play that benefits from you putting this as a bodyguard on 3. That also gets you 2 lore. Right, because why wouldn't you just use another bodyguard that trades out with one of your opponent's threats that have to take it out, like the Prince Eric, which is a 3/3 for 3, inkable at that, right? But it does not gain you lore, whereas this does. So interesting. Again, I think this card is good, and I think it remains to be good, but just something to keep an eye on. It might continue to trend up. The rares might go up to like $2 on average, for example. That's why I'm pointing it out. Next up, we've got Robin Hood, one of the very few cards that on pre-release was selling for less than it currently is. And if you've made it this far in the video, let me know. I can't really see a reason why this card has spiked as much as it has. I did pick up 2 foil ones. I paid $20 each for them, but again, if you know me or watch my videos, you know I'm a huge Robin Hood fan, so I just wanted the foil copies. And I picked up 1 non-foil for $10, but since then, you can see here, the non-foils are selling, well, I guess, look, $10 in Canadian versus $13 USD. This is about $18 Canadian, I think, or at least that's what they're selling for in shops, right? So I have no idea why the non-foil spiked that much, but if you can get the foil ones for like $20 to $22 in Canadian pricing, which in USD, do we have foil? Well, foil ones are going for 22 USD. Wow, okay. Yeah, there's quite a bit of spread here between the non-foils and the foils. In Canada, the foil ones are like yeah, like 22 to 25, and the non-foils are like 20. So I mean, for an extra couple bucks, I would absolutely just pick up the foil ones. This is one of the few legendaries that doesn't have a huge spread between the foil and the non-foil, so I would definitely just pick up the foil ones in this case. But again, this card, what's funny is I think this card is a good card. Again, it gives me Tier Limits vibes from Yu-Gi-Oh, right? Mill your deck, broken ability potentially. But it's like, where is this really going to be used right now relative to the other decks in the meta? Action based, can be concluded in song deck. The thing that immediately comes to mind, and I have made deck lists with this, the thing that comes to mind is Amber Ruby once again, where you can mill good cards, including a revive, to revive whatever you milled into the graveyard. Like, can you imagine milling like I don't know, like a Rapunzel, and then reviving the Rapunzel for free off of this card, and then healing and drawing 3 like that? I mean, that's a very niche scenario, probably doesn't happen. But you mill anything that's expensive. You mill a Maleficent. Oh, sorry, Maleficent doesn't work, right? Because revive is 5 cost or less. But you mill like Maui, play a Maui for free. Like, okay, But again, it's a 1/4 body. It's easily outed. It does quest for 2, so it probably procs the ability once. With Shield of Virtue, you can ready it up. LeFou can ready it up. You can protect it with bodyguards, depending on what you pair it with. With Amber, for example, having bodyguards in its archetype. So it's an interesting card. I think it has some potential, but at most, I think it's more of a casual build. I don't think this becomes super meta relevant, but it is a very fun card, I will say. So keep that in mind. Remember Who You Are apparently is selling out in foils for some reason. Oh, never mind. Yeah, the foils are super cheap. These were going for like $4 Canadian for some reason. But yeah, and here it's like $1 USD, which is like $1.36, $1.50 Canadian. Right? So yeah, I don't know why it's selling out so much in Canada. I don't think this card is very good. I know it was played in a Sapphire Emerald deck along with Clarabelle, but like uninkable, very conditional. It's like, how is this card going to be relevant over something like Clarabelle? Like, I understand you can play both, but like, I'd rather just play Clarabelle and not play this brick. So I would not pick those up. I mean, oh sorry, if you were going to pick them up, I mean, they should be like 20 cents, honestly, for non-foils. Next up, we have Anna. So this is one that I did overpay for. I paid $28 for my foils in Canadian, and I think the foil ones are going for, wow, $14 USD. So $14 USD, if we convert that to Canadian, times 1.36, it's about 19-20 bucks, right? So I overpaid by 8. In Canada, you can, well, maybe you can now, but like, I haven't seen Canada anywhere that's listed foil ones for less than 23. So if I overpaid by $5 for 2 copies, I only bought 2, I didn't buy 4, thankfully. I'm okay with that, right? Because I do want at least 2 foil ones. And I think this card has hidden potential yet to be discovered, or people haven't really broken the mold, in the new version of Emerald Steel post Bucky. In my deck profiles and gameplay videos of Emerald Steel, I did not play this card because I wasn't a Muse focused deck. I have since tried to experiment with Emerald Steel Song decks that uses the Muses and uses Anna. So one of the interesting interactions with a card like this, which again hasn't really been explored and maybe will never be a thing, but it potentially could be, is if you go like turn 4 Muses and then turn 5 you play Anna and proc her ability for 2 to, let's say, make your opponent discard. Okay, great. Fits into the theme of Emerald Steel discard still. Then, next turn, your Muses sits there with War, doesn't get outed. Your Anna sits there, can quest for 2 on the following turn, gets you 2 lore, and then you sing something like a Let the Storm Rage On or Hardcast Storm. Deal 2 damage to a threat, use Muse ability to bounce this card back to hand since it has 2 strength. And then, if you sung the Storm Rage, you still have all your ink available, you recast the Anna, pay the 2 again, and then you have the ability to make your opponent discard again, or you have the ability to banish the character you just damaged with the Steel Song. So I think a card like this has some versatility as like a potential 2 of in an Emerald Steel deck. That's really the only area. I mean, yes, this could also be played in Amber Emerald, but you're really only playing it in Amber Emerald for the discard. I think it has more utility because you can get the versatility out of this card in Emerald Steel, being able to like banish the damaged character with the Steel Song or make your opponent continue to discard. So I think this card is, it was overhyped in the beginning, and then I think it was kind of completely dropped off, and people are really overlooking it now. So will it drop further? Maybe, but I think it is good value if you can pick the foil ones up for like 20 bucks. I think that's good value. Again, it might end up going to 15 or something, but I just think it's worth grabbing, because if Emerald Steel, Emerald Amber continues to be a thing, I think this card can always have a place in those decks because of something like the Muses being able to recycle it constantly. Like, yeah, you can technically recycle other things like the Amber Daisy duck that forces a discard, or like a Lucifer, but this card having a little bit more versatility is pretty big. Like, can you imagine your opponent playing a huge threat in Emerald Steel and you're like, oh my gosh, I'm Steel, I can't really deal with it, and then you're like, oh yeah, I can. Anna, banish it because it's damaged, because I, put a damage on it from like a Fire the Cannons, a Let the Storm Rage on, a Strength of it, like whatever it might be. That's pretty good. That gives Emerald Steel a lot more upper ceiling in order to deal with threats, right? So keep that in mind. I think this card at $10 for the non-foil, maybe it drops a little bit further for the non-foil one, but for the foil ones, being like at, if you can get them for like 20, I think that's fair. Again, the foil ones probably drop a little bit more unless this card really does end up showing up in like meta contending decks in the DLC. Then the price probably spikes up to like back up to 30. But overall, I think it's a decently versatile card and worth that price point. Pride Lands is an interesting one. I was waiting for this card to drop, and it has. It seems to have dropped to about $1.50 Canadian, and for the foil ones. The non-foils you can probably pick up for 50 cents, yeah. So, like, that's not relevant. But if you wanted foil locations, I think this card is pretty good, especially in the Amber Ruby location deck. I think a card like this could power creep out some of the other locations, just because you can Jim Hawkins play this for free, then on the following turn, tuck, move a character here for free. And then, I mean, that's a very specific set of cards, but that facilitates you being able to banish this to play any character. No limitation. It doesn't have to be 5 costs or less like Revive. So if you end up discarding a huge character, you just have a, whatever in your discard, you can just play it for free. Like, what's kind of broken, again, very situational, but like, could you imagine if you were playing like Wreck-It Ralph, the Amber one that came out in Shimmering Skies, and you're like, banish Pride Lands, play Wreck-It Ralph comes into play, target Rapunzel in my graveyard, bring that back to hand, gain 2 lore, then you have Rapunzel next turn, you have a huge body in Wreck-It Ralph. Like, the line of play that you can do with this card is insane. Anything with recursion, right, is very strong in Amber, and a card like this I think is really interesting for that. Plus it's a passive lore gainer. It gains you 1 lore, it has 8 willpower, it's inkable, so it has a lot of interesting things going for it. And if you have no interactions, you're in a top deck mode, you can always pay to move things here and then just banish the location and play a card from your discard. So I think this card is pretty good. And again, if you can grab them for like 50 cents, less than that, I think you definitely grab a playset. I grabbed my playset of non-foils, but I was waiting for the foil ones to adjust in price because they were listed at like $4. But now that they've come down to like $1.50, I'm definitely going to be grabbing a foil playset because it's just a cool card. Again, outside of Ruby Amber locations, does a card like this see play? Probably not, at least not anything I can see immediately. But it's just a cool card. We saw what happened with the 2-cost Pride Lands from Into the Inklands already, right? So yeah, keep that in mind. Interesting card to keep an eye on. And that's going to do it for this market watch. So if you made it this far in the video, let me know what you thought. Was I rambling? Was I concise enough? Were my insights good? What do you agree with? What do you disagree with? Thank you again for watching, though, if you made it this far. Quantum is out.